you with your thing. So it's live.
And we are live. So welcome back everyone to another Think Young's webinar, specifically in the series of our Hidden Inventor campaign, which if you're familiar with Think Young, it's something we started a year ago, and we're very proud and very happy that it's continuing, and it's continuing with the support of Ericsson. For the one of you who are based in Brussels, early next year, you will see billboards all over the town like you've seen last year. The campaign already started. We already visited some schools. Over 600 teenagers have been hearing about the importance of inventors. And speaking about important inventors today, we are here Q&A with Sophie Wilson. It's a great honor and a great pleasure to host you, Sophie. Sophie, first of all, personally, it's the first commander of a British Empire that I speak to, so I'm also particularly excited about it. And for the one of you, most of you know Sophie, I'm sure, but for one of you who don't know, she is, among others, the inventor of the ARM microprocessor, which is today used in and produced over 200 billion microprocessor in the world. So it's literally everywhere and has impacted all our life. We will be taking some questions from the crowd who's watching us on the different platforms. So please, by all means, if you have any question for Sophie, just write it in the platform you're watching us, and we will take some time late. Today, Sophie, your invention are used in thousands of day-to-day products, literally everywhere, including mobile phones, tablet, digital television, even video computer games. So a lot of teenagers who daily use computer games, they use your products, and that's definitely something extremely important. So first of all, thank you for being with us today. You have spent a major part of your career researching and contributing to computer science. Can you tell us a bit about your background, your educational path, and how you ended up becoming such an inventor of computer technology?
Well, I just grew up in a family with two teachers, and teachers are fairly poor people. So my parents' response to that was building everything. So I grew up in a house where my father had made a car or two, had converted vehicles, built all the furniture in the house. My mum had done all the soft furnishings, and many of our clothes were made by my mum. So I grew up in a world where things were made by people I knew. When mum needed equipment for her physics lab, we didn't go out and buy it. We went out and bought the parts and made it. The whole family would sit around the dining table, assembling multimeters and oscilloscopes, that sort of thing. So I think that sort of background is very difficult today. It's hard to make things. All the children grew up to be mathematicians, which is a bit odd with a mother who's a physics teacher and a father who's an English teacher. But obviously, if physics and English are going to meet anywhere, it's in mathematics. So we went off to universities to do mathematics, and I failed. I'm the stupid one of the family. So I went and I failed my maths course pretty badly. The sort of situation where you get called to come to the university to see the senior tutor and told what a disgrace you are, and have a meeting where you cast around for something else to do. So I'd grown up making things, so we picked computer science of all the possible ways to rescue my university career. And so I went off and did that, or rather I just continued the family tradition of making stuff. And that tradition of making stuff meant that when Hermann Hauser wanted to form Acorn Computers, he looked around the university for people who could do stuff and found me. So wow. I'd created a little bit of a reputation for making things. I was the only person that he could find who knew about low power electronics.
Great to hear. Nice. And definitely I like the fact that you touch on both aspects, no? The educational one, which you said you failed, but I mean, still you were at mathematics, so that I would say still a quite high level, course, but also the family one, and the, let's say the after class, which is more and more important, what they call informal education. And thank you for that, because we at Think Young, we're big advocate of that part, and trying to make sure the kids understand that that's not just what you do in class at your desk, but also what you do after class that really has an impact. Then between 1980 and 1981, that's kind of a turning point in your life. You designed the BBC microcomputer together with an amazing team. Shortly after, the ARM microprocessor, which is what we said before, it's basically in 200 billion objects in the last years. And can you take us a bit through the process you have been through as a team, to reach your final result? What do you think was the added value then that you brought to this project?
So, the reason Herman came to find somebody skilled at low power electronics was he's a very badly organized person, and he wanted to have essentially the calendar function of your personal organizer or smartphone. Only this was 1979 and such things didn't exist. So it would have to be built, and it would have to be made by somebody who could handle low power electronics. So he approached me with a single mission of, can I build him his electronic pocketbook? And that was fine. So I said, yes, I can probably do that. I shall go away and draw up some designs, and I would come back and visit him periodically with my folder of drawn up designs. And the world turned when he discovered that in my folder of designs were not only the ones I was doing for him, but all the other ones that I did.
Okay.
So I designed all sorts of other things, including my version of a starter kit for a microprocessor. That became the Acorn System 1. Yeah, Herman lost interest in the electronic pocketbook and said, will that work? And I said, of course it will. So we built that instead. So I didn't go home from university that summer. I just stayed in digs and built that first Acorn System 1. That made Acorn sort of come into existence with a dual role. Herman had started a company called Cambridge Processor Unit, which was a consultancy for helping people use microprocessors. He was a big believer in them for the future. 1979, microprocessors barely existed and very few people knew about them. So the dual role meant that we consulted for people and built them what they wanted, but we also sold things to the public. And so the Acorn System 1 and the system range built up, and Chris Curry left Science of Cambridge and wanted to make a home computer like Science of Cambridge had. So he did that with that was the Acorn Atom, and it was a computer that the rest of us in the company didn't really like very much. So we started building a prototype called the Professional Atom, Proton. And that prototype would be the answer to life, the universe, and everything, and have all mistakes erased and do everything we wanted. And we argued for a long time about what it would be, and that was difficult because there were people who wanted it to be a scientific computer, an office computer, a home computer, and all sorts of things. So one of my contributions was to break that logjam by saying it will be a computer built in two parts. One will be an I/O processor, and the other one will be a language processor, and you can specialize it. Then Chris Curry got hold of the idea that the BBC wanted to make a program about computers, and they were having difficulty finding a company to make them the computer they wanted. So he asked them to come to Cambridge and look at the prototype of the proton, which we didn't have. We were still at the stage of arguing about it. There was no prototype to see.
Okay.
So famously, Herman rang myself and Steve Ferber up on Sunday night and told each of us that the other one had agreed to make a prototype of the proton for the BBC to see on the following Friday. A computer that we were still arguing about the construction of, we hadn't drawn the circuit diagram of. So we came to work on Monday and discovered the deception, obviously, and said, okay, we'll still do it. And we spent the first few days finalizing the design that was in our heads and drawing it out on as a circuit diagram, getting all the components, assembling it on Wednesday with help from Cambridge Computer Lab, and debugging it all Thursday. At 2 a.m. Thursday night into Friday morning, I went home saying, well, it doesn't work yet, but if it does work and it's going to run a program, then I'll be the person writing the program, and I can't do that if I'm this tired. So I went home. I came back early in the morning to discover everybody else asleep under the benches on the floor and the computer prototype working. So I very quickly started porting an operating system to it and a copy of the basic interpreter. The BBC arrived at 10 o'clock, by which time I had most of those things working, which was a little bit hectic. And when they came into the building, Herman and Chris Curry stalled the BBC. So I got another 45 minutes, in which time I could program it to generate a high resolution 640 by 256 display and to have a little dot doing a random walk on the display. So when they came into the lab, they saw a working prototype of the computer, which didn't exist before that. So that sort of thing is impossible without a team of people. You can't do it by yourself, you die.
Yeah, well, fantastic story. I mean, thank you for sharing it with us. And I'm sure if we had the crowd here, they would probably clap in their hands, because it's really, sometimes you hear stories like, to go to the moon, it took 3 years, an amazing story like this one, a very short deadline, very short time, a lot of brain behind. But then nobody really tells you what hour by hour or day by day happens, and you guide us through this, which is extremely interesting to see. And at the end it worked. So that's definitely the most interesting part. One thing that we do clearly as a think tank is, we talk to smart people like you, and then we try to see what's the angle from somehow a policy point of view or a state of an organization, country point of view, etc., etc. So you are clearly a super important inventor, a groundbreaking European inventor, probably the most important or one of the most important European inventors alive at this moment. But what do you think about Europe now, if you look from an inventor point of view? Do you think we have a necessary infrastructure, tools? I mean, you mentioned Cambridge, which clearly is, when it comes to innovation, one of this hub that definitely keeps producing a lot of this. But you think in Europe we have the right frameworks to push innovation forward, especially when you think about the next generation, or when you think about young people? Sophie, years back when you were 20, 25, 28, can all this then encourage young people and young Europeans to eventually become inventors? What do you think of the state of the current state?
Well, most invention isn't like what I just described. Most invention is years of grind and toil. And indeed, we've made the prototype, but to get that machine into production took us another year. So the amount of work that you need to do is extreme. And it takes a multidisciplinary team to do everything. You need people who understand the hardware, understand the software, people like me who understand both at once. I'm not particularly good at the hardware. I'd claim I'm not particularly good at the software, though I know people think I am. Looking at somebody else's work, it's very difficult to really know how good they are. You look at something like BBC Basic, and it's difficult to imagine how many hours I spent polishing that. I wrote BBC Basic from 1980 through to about 1994. So I spent about 14 years for writing it. So even the early ones, they had an enormous history of me writing a lot of code. So it's very difficult to imagine doing that sort of thing without support. I get to do a lot of design that other people implemented. So for the BBC Micro, I designed the machine's operating system, but I didn't code it. People, Paul Bond and John Thackeray, did most of the coding of the BBC Micro's operating system first time round. Working as a team is a skill, and environments that foster multidisciplinary teams are where the most performance occurs. Now, Europe doesn't seem to do that in a multidisciplinary manner. You have tremendous centres of excellence for particular things. So, you go to Sophia Antipolis and you've got people who are tremendously skilled at silicon design, writing RTL hardware, but they don't have even a nearby centre in software. Or you go to somewhere like Leuven in Belgium and you've got people capable of doing the research and design of how a microprocessor and transistor is implemented in silicon. And again, they don't seem to have anything else around there. You did have multidisciplinary places in the past, like Nokia, but they seem to have destroyed themselves in an unfortunate sequence of events. And it's difficult to put those things back together again. I look back at my career and it's sort of seamless. The work at Acorn, at ARM, at Broadcom, it sort of continues straight along, and the momentum is difficult to regain when you break it up. And it's difficult to form those bonds, the working together bonds. If you look at America, things are done quite differently with teams whose members are changing all the time and designers move around. Europe and the UK aren't like that. We tend to form teams that last a really long time because it is so hard.
What do you think it can be done in this respect? If you were, say, as you said, then good results take a lot of time. So imagine we were planning or you were planning, because me, I'm completely out of it. But imagine you were planning the next 20 years and you say, the problem we have is this lack of multidisciplinary approach. Do you think there's something that can be done to foster cooperation in research and innovation, boost Europe competitiveness at the end, with a medium long-term approach? Is there something you think we should be done or could be done, or what would you do?
I think it's waste a lot of money. Where politicians get involved, they always want to fund specific goals. They're inevitably short-term and they're inevitably closed in scope. It's very hard to get politicians to sign up to 10, 20 years of endeavour. And you want to spend money very wisely, make the education system better, teach more people more things, and then give them freedom. When I went to university, the state paid most of my fees. My parents had to fund some of what I did, but the state paid. That meant that I left university without a debt, and I could afford to take a really badly paid job with Acorn. It's very difficult to imagine, but I was paid £100 a month for my first year as a take-on.
Wow. Which year was it?
That's 1979.
Oh, wow.
So when I first worked, I got £100 a month, £1,200 a year, which is ludicrously low. Even if you think about inflation and the value of the pound, etc., no, it was still ludicrously low. And that was a tremendous risk. I wouldn't have been able to do that if I had debts. So it's trusting people to be creative without a guide, without any weight attached, without debts, and
Absolutely.
trusting that the creativeness that is found that way is what you need. Because you can look here now and say, oh, Europe's critically short of the ability to produce its own semiconductor chips. Now, there are many reasons why Europe will never produce its own leading-edge semiconductor chips, but the politicians want to hose money in that direction generally. And that's probably not a sensible thing to do. It is a world economy. You can't all be good at everything, so you want to naturally become good at what you can be good at as a country, as a European economy, and allow specialisms to develop, and mix them up, because it's mixing up. I was employed by Herman originally to do hardware. I did spend most of my life doing a lot of programming and architectural design instead. So, yeah.
On this one,
people
I mean, you mentioned uni 1979. So let's say a 40-year career, more or less. I've done a bit of homework. You have generated 59 patents, which means more than one a year, which is impressive. And again, one of those, I mean, they've really turned into extremely widely used, like the ARM computer, and the descendants are now found everywhere. And over the course of your career, with 59 patents, constant, how important were patents? Let's say a strong intellectual property framework. Again, looking and thinking a bit about policy, because when you mentioned politician, that's something that potentially it's a policy that doesn't require much of budget, because it's just protection of what is the intellectual property, but enabling you to invent, continue inventing how important was that in your career?
So patents. So patents were an invention by George III. So it's originally the letters patent issued by the Royal Sovereign to protect your invention against competition. So in order to foster the Industrial Revolution in England, the monarch said, if you come here to do your inventions, I will protect you and your inventions from competition by other people. So patents are restrictive. Patents are a bad thing. They give somebody a competitive edge by stopping other people using it. And really, you'd like ideas to run free and not be patented. So the sole surviving grace of patents is they do expire. The letter patents last for a fixed time. So again, in the original justification for inventing patents, the idea was to stop people keeping trade secrets, to get things published, even if there was a timescale. So the 20 years timescale, when it's the Industrial Revolution and it takes a long time to develop from one steam engine to the next, to a pump, to a spinning jenny, that probably didn't matter. But now everything moves so fast, that 20-year timescale of a patent is far too long. So a review of how inventors get rewarded and how you get inventors to work together, because you need inventors to work together. I may have 59 patents, but they're in bunches covering particular sets of features all at once. And you can't do that without a lot of people working together at the same time on something. So many of those patents, I am the single named inventor, but a decent number of them have multiple authors where we multiply invented the same thing working in close collaboration. So reform the patent system, be more open, get people to be able to operate without debt and be supported and contribute their ideas, and so on.
We open now the question from the crowd who's watching us. So there should be at certain point on the screen a question coming up from someone who's watching us. So I'm looking and speaking to my team, our team in the background, who's about to publish one potentially. Here you go. Currently, this is Evelyn. Currently on Facebook at the moment. Currently, because of schools closure, so we're looking at COVID and a lack of access to digital infrastructure, many young people face limitation for their learning. You spoke about the importance of education, and what would be your advice to those persons that cannot easily access education and learning? Now, this is extremely important. We're speaking about rural areas, we're speaking about access, we're speaking about digital divide. We can talk for 20 hours about it. So thank you, Evan, for the question. So if you can take it 20 seconds, that would be great.
So why did Herman come and find me as an expert on low power? Well, in 1971, RCA published the CMOS data book. CMOS would go on to become the way that all transistors are designed. And I bought their data book and I read it cover to cover many times. So books are great, and the modern version of books, PDFs that you download from the internet, are great. Wikipedia's less great, but at least it gives you a start. So find things, read them, understand them. You don't need massive infrastructure to do that. Go to a library.
Clear. And also, I think one thing you probably you said, I mean, that's something that less and less people do. Read them several times. It's very rare, I think, to find people who read the same book, like 10 times. It's really rare, no?
Read, understand, become an expert. Demonstrate your expertise. So it wasn't enough that people knew that I'd read the RCA CMOS data book. They also knew that I'd built things out of CMOS. I had practical experience and could demonstrate that I could do stuff. So that's the second bit. So read, understand, learn, and then practice. And practice makes perfect. And nowadays, if you're going to do it in software, then there are all sorts of multi-platform contribution systems that you can join together and work with people on. So do that, do stuff. By doing, you learn better than just by listening in class.
Yeah, which is what you were doing with your parents. Now, if we go back to the very beginning.
Yes, we did things, practical things.
We are, I would say, widely famous for trying to be as much as possible on time. And we promised you would stay until 5:30, so we still have 2 minutes. But if you allow, we'll probably ask a couple of more questions, which will probably take 5 or 6 more minutes. Up to you. I don't.
I have time for 5 or 6 more minutes. That's not a problem.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So, second question, Michelle from YouTube. I mean, watching on YouTube, not from YouTube. Hello, Mrs. Wilson. I wanted to know if, looking back, would you have done anything differently throughout your career?
It's very difficult to look back and say I should have done that differently, knowing what I know now, because doing it the way you did it in the first place, even if it was wrong and stupid, taught you something. So no, I don't think I could change anything to advantage. I made mistakes, lots of them. I learned from that, and you can't eliminate the mistakes because then you eliminate the learning.
Thank you for this, because you said it before, you're saying it now. Another thing we're extremely big advocates of is, fail fast, if you can fail forward, and then make mistakes and go ahead. That's really important. It's all an iteration today. We live in a world where you need to constantly do the small improvement. A last question from the crowds. This is from, okay, so we're covering all the platforms today. Hilar is watching on LinkedIn. Did you ever feel uninspired or with a lack of creativity? And if yes, how did you overcome that? That's also during COVID. It's quite an important question because clearly staying at home doesn't really help much creativity. Thank you, at least personally, thank you very much for your insights. This is enough. All of them.
So how do you overcome lack of creativity? So, as it were, the computer architect's version of writer's block. You go and do something else. Go for a walk. Play a computer game. Do not ever, ever, ever sign up to Facebook. I had a massive advantage over people today. There was no digital distractions. There were no dings of email going off, tweets, Facebook, instant messaging, etc. Unsubscribe from all those things. They suck your time in ways you wouldn't believe. So everything, go to a museum, look at the works of great painters. They're astonishing. And again, just like what I said earlier, when you're looking at a painting, it can seem impossible that anybody actually sat there and did that. And the secret is it took a lot of time. It really was hard work, and they did that. And so you've got to spend a lot of time on things. You can't really do that if you're being tweeted at.
Great. If I can close on a question similar to this, but more than tailored to the inventors, would you have any recommendation for young inventors, for future inventors?
Study maths. Maths isn't just arithmetic. Maths is critical thinking in a nutshell. It teaches you how to break problems apart and put them back together again. So maths is the basis of science and engineering. Study maths, do well at maths. Then add the other things.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thanks very much. Really, I would stay here for hours, and I'm sure also people watching us. The video will be then available on our platform. So if someone just joined the last 10 minutes, you can watch everything live immediately again after this call. As I said, the campaign called Hidden Inventors, which runs under the hashtag Hidden Inventors, is already started. Will pick up and go big in January, February. Today we started the series of webinars like we usually do, and this was the first one, and we really cared about having the first one with Sophie Wilson, because definitely, if you don't know, please do study her life, career. Absolutely amazing. Everything, Sophie, you have done, it's literally everywhere around me in this moment and around us watching this. And you do it with such a clarity and peace, which is really inspiring. So I'll make sure to watch it myself again, because it was really nice to hear you. And thank you very much for your time and for how nice you've been to our team as well. Thanks to the team who put this together, definitely. As always, there is a lot of people behind the background who help. The last and most important thanks goes to the partner of Think Young in this endeavor to discover European inventors, which is Ericsson. And thanks a lot, Sophie.
Thank you very much.
Have a wonderful, well, weekend almost. It's coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.